Rika.
Okay, I guess we can get started. It's 6:04. So I will begin by calling the meeting to order, 6:04, and performing a roll call. I'll start on my left. Mitchell.
Present.
Leslie. Present. I'm here, Rika. And then Eric.
Here.
And Niall. Not present. And Kevin Harper.
You said he would be absent.
Okay. Well then, with that, we do have a quorum. So we can move on to the next item, which is the approval of the agenda. So folks want to take a quick look to see if there are any comments, changes, adjustments. And if not, if I could get a motion to approve the agenda. I'll do it first by Leslie. Can you guys comment? Oh. So before we approve the agenda, let me open it up to public comment. Are there any public commenters? Or general public comment?
You have to approve your agenda first.
What?
We're commenting on the approval of the agenda, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
You don't have to take public comment on that.
Okay. Okay, then I will, sorry about that. So I think Leslie, you were first. Okay, second by Mitchell. Are there any opposed to approval of the agenda? Anyone to abstain? Okay, then the agenda is approved. So then we'll move into brief announcements from staff, commissioners, or city council liaisons. Start with staff.
I will start. I do have one. I'm not sure, you may have received or seen some information from our city clerk's office, but we are recruiting for the advisory commissions. And as you know that our commission has some vacancies. And so if you're aware of anybody who might be interested or you think are good for being members of the commission, please let them know. The deadline to apply, I believe, is September 12th, which is a Friday, so in less than a couple of weeks. So just wanted to give you guys heads up and see if you know people in the community that might be interested or would be a good addition. So that's my announcement.
Which day was that again, Ellen?
It's due on Friday, September 12th, the applications to the city clerk's office.
Any brief
Yeah,
announcements?
thank you, Chair. Again, as Elena said, we're recruiting because you all know we had to temporarily reduce the size of this commission from 7 down to 5. And with your very artful advocacy, we didn't make that decision. We want to go back up to 7, but we really need folks to get the word out. I also want to let you know that in early October, I think perhaps on October 10th, the city is going to be doing a training for chairs and vice chairs. Because all of us really want everyone who serves on these commissions to feel really comfortable that you know how to handle the meetings, know what the rules are, and can step in and do it even if you don't have any experience. And so Gloria Partita and I are the subcommittee that's been working on some of the commission reform efforts. We're working together with staff and we will keep you posted on that. And it's welcome to everyone, even if you're not a chair or vice chair. Anyone who wants to come, and we promise we won't make it overly legalistic and we won't get into all the nuances of Robert's rules, but it will be something to help everyone feel really comfortable with running meetings.
Thank you. Are there any brief announcements from my fellow commissioners? No. Well then, I think we can move on to the next item, which is general public comment. So if there are any public commenters, feel free to come forward.
Hello, my name is Maria Pascal, and I'm here to speak on a community-led effort urging the City of Davis to update its investment policy to reflect socially responsible principles, including divestment from Musk-controlled companies. I speak on behalf of Divest Musk YOLO, a grassroots group with members across Yolo County, including 13 in Davis. were co-sponsored by Indivisible YOLO and the Woodland Democratic Club, with support from NorCal Resist, YOLO Interfaith Immigration Network, Tesla Takedown, and the Stop the Money Pipeline. Our petition has over 1,500 handwritten signatures, with more online showing broad community support. We're asking the city to take the following steps. End new financial agreements with Musk-owned or controlled companies like Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink, The Boring Company, Neuralink, and XAI. Review and phase out existing contracts or subsidies where feasible. Stop official use of platforms like X and XAI. Urge CalPERS to halt new Tesla stock purchases in actively managed funds. CalPERS currently holds about $2 billion in Tesla stock, for context, and require due diligence before approving Musk-related projects, including the use of robo-taxis. City Council members directed us to bring this to you as you revise the investment policy. The City of Davis socially responsible investment goals, including equity, sustainability, and democratic accountability, must be matched by concrete actions. Elon Musk's companies are implicated in labor rights violations, safety failures, environmental harm, and anti-democratic influence. These run counter to YOLO County values and should not be supported with public funds. In addition to the socially responsible considerations, it is prudent for the Financial Commission to critically consider the quality of investment in Musk companies. Musk has stated in interviews about Tesla that he does not care about protecting shareholder value. Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink are facing a growing number of serious legal challenges. The list includes multiple lawsuits related to shortcomings associated with Tesla's claims of full self-driving, claims which have artificially inflated share prices. The requested update to the City of Davis investment policy is not just symbolic. It is a necessary step to ensure public dollars are in sound investments and do not enrich individuals who are working against the public interest. Other governments are already acting. We urge Davis to lead by example. Please adopt investment policies that reflect our shared values and protect public resources. Thank you for your service and your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to come up for public comment?
My name is David Allegron. I'm a 40-year Davis resident. And I'd like to talk about the issue of why it's important for this organization, this commission, to pass to amend the socially responsible investment policy to divest from the Musk properties companies. And it's because the city of Davis is really a vanguard city. We're a small city, but we're an important city. A lot of things that have become nationwide and progressive always started a lot in Davis. You think of village homes, you think of bike paths, you think of co-housing. A lot of those things started right here in Davis. And I think it's time for Davis to take the lead on this one too. Even though we're a small city, we're really an important city when it comes to implementing new policies. And right now, many of us are really concerned about threats that are going on to our democracy. And that's one of the reasons that we feel that taking this step is really important, because Elon Musk has demonstrated that by using his extreme wealth, his $290 million that he plunks down to essentially buy an election that none of us wanted, I presume, he's showing that the power of one person's wealth is more important than the voices of the many people. And so by Davis taking a step and passing this resolution and making it public, I mean, it's one thing for us not to invest in Musk companies. It's another thing for us to make a public statement about it, because there's a lot of other cities or just states are just kind of wondering, should we do this? Is it important? Are we just going to be, shouting into the void? But this is a proactive, preventative step. If we can't stop index funds from buying Tesla stock, certainly our city can commit that managed funds and local contracts will not support Musk. This sets a clear standard for responsible investment and ethical governance. It aligns our city with other progressive municipalities and protects our values as a community. It sends a message that the city of Davis will not fund instability, exploitation, or oligarchic influence. It's a step towards ensuring that our public resources and that of other cities and municipalities that look for guidance see that and they take the same kind of step. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Catalina Silva Oliveira, and I'm here to speak in support of updating Davis's socially responsible investment policy to reflect current legal and ethical concerns, specifically the extensive and ongoing lawsuits involving Elon Musk's companies. So as of August 2025, Tesla, SpaceX, Corp, and Neuralink are all facing a growing number of serious legal challenges that raise questions about ethical, legal, and financial standings. So let's start with Tesla. In April, a Florida jury awarded about $329 million damages in a fatal crash involving Tesla's autopilot. The jury found Tesla partially liable for this. And that includes several class action lawsuits regarding its unsafe full self-driving features. On top of that, Tesla is also being sued by the California Civil Rights Department for racial harassment at its Fremont factory, while a parallel shareholder lawsuit cites a toxic workplace culture in other factories. And the NLRB has filed multiple complaints accusing Tesla of union suppression at the Buffalo plant. Moving on to X Corp, or familiarly known as Twitter, the company is facing multiple severance lawsuits, including claims from four former executives seeking about $128 million in unpaid compensation, and this also includes several vendor payment lawsuits that are mounting about $61 million in unpaid equipment bills. And the company is also being sued for trademark infringement, both in the US and abroad, and it's embroiled in an antitrust lawsuit involving major global advertisers alleging a conspiracy to boycott X's platform. At SpaceX, 8 former employees are suing for wrongful terminations, retaliation, and harassment, including claims regarding Elon Musk's own conduct. Environmental groups have also sued SpaceX over its rocket launches near Texas Wildlife Refuge, citing flawed FAA approval. Even a neighboring company, Cards Against Humanity, has filed a $15 million land dispute lawsuit alleging illegal construction by SpaceX. And finally, Neuralink is facing a lawsuit from a former employee who claims she was fired for being pregnant and was exposed to herpes B after being scratched by monkeys, all due to lack of proper safety equipment. Collectively, these lawsuits involve hundreds of millions of dollars in potential liabilities and touch on everything from wrongful termination and racial harassment to environmental degradation and deceptive business practices. These aren't speculative or minor regulatory disputes. They all represent a pattern of disregard for labor rights, ethical conduct, and legal compliance. As fiduciaries of public funds, we cannot afford to overlook this, and the City of Davis should not be financially entangled with companies that pose not only reputational risk, but legal and ethical liability. As a UC Davis student and a member of several youth advocacy groups, I strongly urge this committee to revise the socially responsible investment policy to exclude companies like those owned by Elon Musk with documented histories of serious and ongoing litigation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for letting us speak here. I'm Tom Pattison, and not to cover things that have already been talked about. There is, I think, for a values-driven committee, we need to consider the overstated safety and automation claims that Tesla's making, particularly robo-taxi is now the driver of the $1 trillion valuation. The company's actually made no money historically because all the money it's made went to pay Elon Musk $29 billion of compensation. It strikes me particularly because I've taken care of Tesla's injured workers. They make $22 an hour. They go from Fresno up to the Fremont plant. They sleep in their cars. Then they come back to Fresno and take care of their kids. They're making $22 an hour while we're endorsing a system that pays Musk $29 billion for part-time work. There's also the complicity risk in that the lithium-ion batteries are actually lithium-cobalt batteries, and cobalt is 70% of its mined in Congo with child labor. There's also poor controls about using forced labor in parts of China that Tesla doesn't screen out properly. And then there's oversight of power concentration, obviously with Musk. There's very little control of the board. That's why Delaware knocked down the $58 billion award for his CEO, part-time CEO work. And there's the labor dignity issues of fair pay. There's serious safety violations that the plant in California, and Fremont, and Austin, and other ways. So for all these reasons, I think from a values-driven standpoint, it's important for the committee to adopt a defund Tesla stance. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Mary Algorn, and I'm going to just add on to what my colleagues here are sharing with you about Tesla and, Musk investments. One thing that I would add is that work safety has been an issue, and as of August 2025, OSHA has cited Tesla 48 times for safety violations, including injuries and fatalities. In terms of labor practices, the National Labor Relations Board had 24 investigations into Musk companies as of 2025. Tesla is being sued by Equal Employment Opportunity Commission for widespread racial harassment and retaliation at its Fremont facility. There are documented allegations of wage theft at the Texas Gigafactory. From 2013 to today, Tesla has faced multiple penalties for wage, hour, and discrimination violations from the U.S. Department of Labor and the California Labor Commission and others. Environmental violations are also persistent and well documented. Tesla violated the Clean Air Act for 12 consecutive quarters and used 6-acre evaporation pond and discharged over 9,000 gallons of untreated wastewater into Austin's sewer system. SpaceX has paid penalties for discharging launch cooling water into protected wetlands. The Boring Company has been fined for discharging untreated water and operating without proper permits. Regulatory noncompliance is widespread. Tesla faced multiple SEC and DOJ investigations of securities fraud, accounting irregularities, and misleading statements about self-driving technology. It has paid hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties. Now, you can verify this information by looking at violationtracker.good.jobsfirst.org. Our investment policy is, if our investment policy is to mean anything, it must reflect these realities. Continuing to invest or do business with entities that have long lists of endangering workers, violating public labor rights, and damaging the environment, misleading regulators is not socially responsible. It is complicity. I respectfully urge this committee to update our socially responsible investment policy to exclude companies with extensive documented violations, beginning with Musk-owned firms.
Are there any other in-person commenters? Any recorded or sent in that we should include?
No, we have a public comment that I forwarded, but it was specific to item 6.
Okay.
No other comments.
Okay, so I think with that, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent items. So these would be the quarterly, starting with the quarterly treasurer's reports. Is there, do we take public comment on this? No, okay.
Yes, on public comment, but you don't have to go individually. You can approve the entire consent agenda item.
Okay. Well then, I will just start with any discussion up here on any of the items on the consent agenda, or would anyone like to have further discussion of any of these items?
Madam Chair, I did have one question, and I didn't look at all of the treasurer's reports, but I pulled a few and just trying to get familiar with the information that's included there. And I did have a question about how the city approaches where it puts its funds. You know, there's a local bank account. There's the LAIF, which I'm familiar with from my previous work. And there was another place that you can, very safe place to park funds. But what's the approach that you go through to determine when it goes to LAIF, when it goes to the local bank checking account? Do you try to move money from one to another to, I mean, the interest rates being paid are not very substantial, but there is a decent difference between some of them. I noticed that they changed over time too, which was interesting. But without going into too much detail, and forgive me if I should have called you with this question before, but how do you make that determination about where to park the funds?
I'll start with a little bit of a history, I think. Although it relates me, I will say that. My understanding is a while back, city was investing 100% in LAIF only. I'm not sure under which circumstances, but the city hired an investment management firm, which is PFM. And their recommendation was to not do 100% investing into LAIF, and kind of diversify the investment portfolio. Council at the time was, I'm going to say, somewhat conservative, and was a little cautious with doing the investing into something other than, I'm going to call it LAIF. So if you look at our portfolio, even currently, it's on a shorter duration. So majority of it from 1 to 3 year duration for a lot of the investments. So that's, I think, part of the reason. So that was where council came from at the time. We have invested or contributed, I believe, a year and a half ago at this point, an extra $20 million where we took it out of our current banking account and put the money into more of a managed investments that are managed by PFM. Other than that, the investment policy directs where to invest funds, not the companies, but the type of securities, let's say corporate and whatnot. My understanding is to support local banks, which in this case it was River City Bank. Council wanted to do an investment with them. That's why you see a certificate of deposit as one of the investments included as well. But majority of the investments are in either managed portfolio by PFM or LAIF Camp. Mostly those provide liquidity and readily available in case we need it for operations.
Yeah, and I forget how LAIF works, but can you transfer funds from LAIF pretty quickly, within a matter of days?
Yes, so depending on the dollar amount, if it's over $10 million, they do ask you to give them a heads up of about, I believe, 2 or 3 days ahead. If it's over 10 million, if it's anything under, you call them in. If you do it by a certain time, I believe 10 in the morning, you'll get the funds that same day. Otherwise, it's after the cutoff, it's the next day.
Okay. I mean, one thing I noticed, and it might have just been the random reports that I opened up, there were a good number of them in the packet, but I was surprised by the difference between the rates that, and was pretty surprised that Lake was paying a higher rate than a commercial bank was. Maybe that was just temporary and that changed over time, but it was just surprising to me that there was such a differential in those rates for basically cash accounts, I'll call them. There's probably a better term, but I call them cash accounts because within days the city could access those funds. And substantially so, like 2-3 percentage points difference in the interest rate. And that got me curious about how is this managed? Maybe when you look at the actual amounts that generates, it's not a huge amount, but we talked at our last meeting about revenue generating opportunities for the city, and that would seem to be a pretty low impact, low risk way of doing it.
I guess I'll just add a couple of things too. One of the things that's so interesting is that the majority of our funds are invested in these pooled money investment accounts. And we do it for the very reason you're saying. We reap the benefits of pooled money because there's so much more in the accounts that we can earn higher interest rates. And I know Elena said this, but I think it's really important to emphasize a couple of things. Government agencies, unlike private corporations and others, which have broad latitude about where and with whom they invest, the state law prescribes the nature of the investment instruments that we can permissibly invest in. We can't do anything not permitted by law. And the other thing that's so key that I know is kind of a challenge for folks when they've worked in the private sector is this idea that with public investing, it's all about following the prudent investor rule, preserving the asset and minimizing risk so that you preserve the asset. You're not really trying to make a tremendous amount of money. You're trying to avoid risk. And I know sometimes that's kind of a challenge for some folks who come to us, from the private sector. So.
Yeah, again, my experience has been with LAIF, which I don't think, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think is terribly risky.
No, it's not.
And so I was just, and I get that there's this block of money that's invested in corporate securities, I guess you'd call it, or notes or bonds. I wasn't clear, but they're linked to a specific company. I'm not talking about going whole hog in that. I'm just saying there's a pretty healthy amount of money that's in these cash accounts. And I was surprised by the interest rate differential and why you'd have anything other than a minimal cash flow amount at River City Bank if they're paying you a pittance relative to LAIF. Just that. Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail this here, but I appreciate your entertaining the question.
I guess maybe to this item, maybe we can pull it off of consent if I have another question related to it, or no, we keep it there.
You don't need to pull an item from consent if you just want to ask clarifying
Okay.
questions.
Yeah,
You pull it off, then you move into the full-on staff presentation, et cetera.
Okay, got it.
Your prerogative.
Okay. Well then, I just I have a clarifying question about the treasurer's reports. Do they? I wasn't sure. I didn't get all of them. I looked at some of them. But when the yield is listed next to the investment type, does it also is that net of fees, or does that include the fees that like Lake or Camp are charging?
I'm going to say it already includes those because we do not pay any separate bills. So LAIF, for example, before we even get quarterly interest, their fees are already subtracted.
Okay.
So we don't pay anything separate on either.
Okay, so like when I see the September 2021, a while ago, which is the only one I have open right now, but like Camp, it was 0.05%, and so that's already after the fees went out and everything. Okay, correct. That makes sense. Do you have any clarifying questions on any of these items?
Yeah, I have a clarifying question, just sort of on a higher level of when the commission gets reports like these quarterly reports, what generally is sort of helpful feedback from the commission in the context of when we review it? Is it like looking out for irregularities, or like what have prior commissions offered when they accept these informational items? Like, does the recommendation is accept it, but what can the commission offer that's helpful in the context?
Well, I guess, I'm guessing at this point, I guess. But what you could do is look at, it's an informational item and it's obviously after the fact. So all of those have already happened. My guess would be you could look at the type of investments and, ask questions about that. We can also bring PFM to do a presentation to you if you guys want to have more discussion on the managed portfolio portion. I'm going to say maybe recommendation could be, or, discussion point, if that's the case, to be brought back as a regular agenda item would be related to perhaps considering investing in a longer term duration. Obviously, we're limited, as Donna mentioned, by what the California government code prescribes, which shouldn't really go beyond 5 years. But as I said, currently we're at 1 to 3 years, right? Perhaps you will decide that, or would suggest maybe looking into investing less in more liquid investments, let's say LAIF, CAMP, and putting more funds into managed portfolio. So I guess those would be maybe points of discussion, or if you want to bring it back as a regular item to have additional discussion points, we certainly can do that. But that would be maybe suggestions that I could see the commission answering. But in general, this presents information, as I said, that in this case ended as of June 30th, 25. So there's not much we can do. That is what it is.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you.
I have one other. I guess maybe it would be helpful if these, since they're quarterly reports, if maybe every quarter they could also come to, like, not all of them necessarily, but just like each one as it appears.
So that's the idea.
Okay.
So because we've been behind, we are catching up, which is why you see so many. So in the staff report, we also identified, so we stated that we are behind and we are catching up, and the goal is to bring it on a quarterly basis. Part of the reason is that in the past, staff included fully reconciled bank balance. That takes time to do. And so instead, we talked with the city manager's office, we actually talked to our auditors. The goal is to be able to bring the information to the commissioners, to city council sooner rather than later. So we've changed it where we don't use a reconciled bank balance. We're presenting you what the bank statement balance is. So this way you get to see the information of the entire cash and investment portfolio sooner, because we think there's a greater benefit to that rather than waiting for a reconciled bank balance.
That makes sense. And then do we need public comment on consent? No. Okay, great. So I guess, can I get would anybody be interested in making a motion to approve the reports, the fiscal commission meeting minutes, and the fiscal commission minutes of August 6th and June 4th?
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second? Any abstentions, disagreements? Okay, well then, with that,
Oh, are you asking for a vote now?
oh, yes.
I'll vote aye.
Okay, sorry. There, I guess I will vote aye as well. And I think we have a motion. So with that, it's approved. We can move on to the next item.
Chair Michael, if I could just offer clarification in case people in the audience weren't unclear. General public comment is for two purposes. It's for items not on the agenda that are within your jurisdiction, for people to bring it forward for your attention, and also for the consent calendar. So
Okay,
that's why you
got
don't take separate public comment on the consent calendar.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So we'll move on to the regular items. The first being the appointment of a chair and vice chair to lead the commission through June 30th, 2026. And so I will open this up for public comment. There. No, okay. And then I guess I'll put it up to discussion here.
As the newcomer here, is there a custom for this commission in terms of, I'm assuming that you've been serving as chair, or are you vice chair, sitting in the chair seat tonight?
Chair.
Okay, I'm still getting to know everyone and hoping everyone will be here at one time to understand fully the roles. So is it customary that the chair serves a term and then someone else becomes the chair?
I think we've had not very many people on this commission, so I don't know that we've settled on a custom necessarily.
I'll try to answer this one. So usually we appoint a chair for a year, and then each year, that happens to be a reappointment. So in the past, because the time each year we serve is from July, so fiscal year from July to the end of June, we have traditionally not had a meeting in August because council took a recess. This year was a little different. It happened in July. So we put it up for selection of the chair and a vice chair in August. And as you know, we pushed it to this meeting because we didn't have many people attend. So we're doing the vice chair and chair selection at this meeting. So you're welcome to nominate yourself. You nominate your fellow commissioners. And that person will serve through the end of this fiscal year through June 30th. And then we will redo this again. Normally, I guess we could do it at some point, maybe in June timeframe going forward, so that we'll already have one pre-selected. Part of the reason we didn't do it because we have new commissioners coming in, and the commission was sort of restructured, so we felt that it would be best to do it after, which fell on the August meeting of this year. So I do want to mention that we do not have, Kevin Harper is another commissioner who is a regular appointee, and we've asked him at the last meeting if he wanted to serve, and in the end he said yes, if there's somebody who decides to nominate him, he is going to be happy to do that. I do see that Niall is not here. Unfortunately, I think you might need to be present according to our city clerk to be nominated, so, and.
Unless we're really devious.
Yeah, I guess so, because the person has to accept the responsibility, I guess. And also wanted to mention that we have asked Eric, because you are considered alternate at this point, you cannot be nominated for chair or vice chair. So.
Right. Who is our current vice chair?
We do not have one.
Oh.
So a little bit of background, Rika was selected last year as a chair, and one of the outgoing commissioners last year was a vice chair. So we have been serving at this point without a vice chair.
I'm looking to that end of the podium.
Yeah.
Is anyone interested in being nominated as chair?
I would be happy to serve in either position. I watched last month's meeting, even though I wasn't present, and I recall that Niall said he was not interested. So since he's not here, I guess that doesn't matter. But I thought Commissioner Marco actually did a great job serving as chair at the last meeting. So I am delighted to nominate him if he is interested, and I'm, again, happy to serve in either role as well.
Yeah, I would accept the nomination for either position, and I'd also like to nominate Commissioner Inge for either position, chair or vice chair.
Okay, are there any other nominations?
No, we just have to have a choice between those two. I like those two being our chair and vice chair. I just, it's hard when you're modest to say you really would prefer to be chair.
Okay, well, I will move to,
It's okay to nominate yourself. I'm just saying, yes, go for it.
fair enough. Oh, does anyone else have nominations or can go for motion?
Well, I don't have any other nominations, but I'm happy to make a motion. So I guess I would move for Leslie to be the chair and Mitchell to be the vice chair. And do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any ayes? Any ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? Obviously not. And any no abstentions, I guess. So I will, so then Mitchell as vice chair, Leslie as the chair, that's approved. So,
And will this be in effect at the conclusion of this meeting tonight?
Yes, that's correct. So for next meeting, we'll coordinate with
Great, so
Leslie and-
congratulations, you two. for working on
Okay, with that, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the solid waste.
A little bit of shuffling here, if you don't mind, real quick. Congratulations. All right. For those of you who I've already met, hello again. For those of you who I'm meeting for the first time, my name is Adrienne Heinig. I'm the Deputy Director in Public Works, Utilities, and Operations for the City of Davis. And Public Works, Utilities, and Operations, as the name suggests, is where we host our utilities. And the city operates 4 utilities: water, wastewater, stormwater, which is a utility, and the reason why I'm here tonight, which is solid waste. Although my name is here on the presentation and I'm going to be the one talking to you tonight, we do have a wonderful team that supports the operations of this utility and the creation of the lengthy reports that you have received from us on this so far, and I wanted to appreciate them and their efforts as well. So why are we here? That's always my favorite question. I would love to tell you. We're here because with the recent visits that we've had to this commission, we've talked about our annual fund updates. So that's going to be a check-in each year on how our utilities are doing, and potentially if there is an established rate schedule by council or there is a built-in CPI as there is for stormwater, then we might talk about some rate recommendations within those already approved parameters. Well, now we're here to talk about establishing those approved parameters. So we're looking at our solid waste utility and considering the setting of rates for the next 5 years, which is what we are allowed to do with solid waste. I will jump ahead a little bit of some of the questions that we received. There is no CPI built into rates that are set for 5 years. It is just whatever that schedule, that calendar says. So right now, with our solid waste utility, our expenditures are outpacing revenue, and this is not good. This puts a tremendous stress on the reserve and on the utility, and we need to make sure that we can address this. Since the last cost of service study that we had, which concluded in 2018, or the study included in 2018, the rate adjustments concluded in 2023, we've seen significant increases in the cost of pretty much everything. And I know that's the same song and dance you've been hearing for a while, especially through the budget process that we had with the city just now. Everything is costing more. And unfortunately, this is not the last time we're going to be in front of you talking about adjustments to our rates because of that, because we're seeing that stress just everywhere. Like I said, the last adjustment solid waste was in 2023, where this commission does not approve those rates. This commission recommends the rates or an alternative schedule, whatever they're interested in looking at, and then we would take that information to council, and council ultimately is the body that says yes or no, and issues what's called a Proposition 218 notice, which we'll get a little bit more into later. So what I have for you tonight is some general background on solid waste, the information about what is driving these cost increases, and then a bit of a deeper dive into what the state says we have to do when we're looking at adjusting our charges. So one big giant step back, what is solid waste? When you look at it, initially it looks pretty straightforward, right? You're looking at, in Davis, a set of 4 bins, and you're thinking, okay, which bin does this thing go in? There you go, that's solid waste. But actually, beneath the surface, and if I can borrow from the landfill, underneath, there's quite a lot going on influencing what solid waste is. Chiefly of that is going to be our regulations. Because trash is gross, there has to be a lot of things built around it to protect our environmental safety, to be environmental stewards, human health, wildlife health, all manner of things. So there are a lot of costs that are going to be driven by those regulations. There are, for example, minimum diversion rates that cities are required to follow. We have very prescriptive, there we go, rules about
what color bins you're putting stuff in, where your construction and demolition debris go, where your hazardous waste goes. Of course, these are all very important, but they make this an expensive utility to operate. The other piece that we've been exploring as a state much more recently has been the connection between landfills and carbon emissions. And there is a tremendous connection there. In fact, they've created what's called, SB 1383, which is a focus on getting organic material out of the landfill, so it's not sitting in that landfill, just falling apart and issuing those gases. It's going to a beneficial reuse, which would be composting or other types of use. So you add that to what is already a very complicated utility, and you see a lot of those drivers of cost increase. We have established percentage diversions for the city and for the state. A lot of fun in trying to move forward with those, and then of course we had the global pandemic and kind of everything went up into the ether, and we're kind of bringing ourselves back in. So what does Davis do for solid waste? We have essentially two arms of solid waste. We have our program, and then we have our operations. And in Davis, our operations are done by a private company. And it is a private company, even though it's Recology Davis, and even though previously it was Davis Waste Removal, it was still a private company, which can be a little bit confusing for folks, and we've tried to make sure that's clear. So within the city, we have our program, we have our diversion program. And that's where we're taking in all of the legislation, and we're taking in all the things we're required to do by the state. We're understanding it, and then we're producing it again for our community to ensure that they have the tools they need to be able to comply with what we need to do. And we have a lot of success doing that. We have our implementations of our diversion programs, outreach, and then of course what our finance folks do in our customer billing. We have state reporting requirements, management of arguably very small but very important grants from CalRecycle to be able to run some of these programs as well. And then we oversee that contract with our franchise hauler, which is the one that's going to be the one to collect the material from the front of your house, from the carts in front of your home, or in your multifamily property or your commercial property, and then take that material to where it needs to go. If it's a recyclable, it goes to their materials recovery facility on 2nd Street, which we also call a MRF for fun. Or if it's trash, it'll go to the landfill. Or if it's organics, it will also go to the landfill, but that's because we have a compost facility at our landfill. We're very lucky. Not a lot of organizations or jurisdictions have that access. And that material goes there to be reused into rich compost, nutrient-rich compost. One thing I will note that makes Davis a little bit unique as opposed to other communities in regards to our program is we do have dual stream recycling, and that's why you see 4 bins instead of 3 here. There are a few places that will collect paper and bottles and cans together. We collect them separately. That does mean that we have a really clean paper, and it is very marketable, which is good. So our current rates, like I said before, were set back in 2018. Our last adjustment was in 2023, and we were able to meet all of our financial goals for the utility, which included the establishment of a reserve. Before that rate adjustment period, we did not have a reserve for this utility. It is somewhat unique with our other utilities in that we're not actually doing the operations. So it's, it could be that folks didn't see the need for a reserve, but of course, anytime we're looking at something where folks are paying rates, we want to make sure we have a buffer of some kind. And then you can see here that for our residential service bins, we have our current rate structure, and it is set to the size of your cart, is our sort of delineation of that rate structure. So what do these rates actually pay for? And I have a giant list here, but it includes the obvious things, the things you see every week when you have your items collected, the assisted collection service that Recology offers for folks that need it, seasonal yard material pile collection that operates at the end of October bi-weekly through February, and then for 1 week in May. Street sweeping, we have business audits, we have that operation of that materials recovery facility, like I mentioned before, and local customer service for Recology. So if folks have issues with their carts, or if there's a missed pickup, they can go ahead and pick up that phone and call Recology, and they can dispatch someone out there. We also have a bulky items voucher that all of our residents receive annually, which is good for one sort of cartload of material to go to the landfill for free, which can be great if you have some odds and ends. 2 free shredding events, generally April and October. We have the drop-off bins that are outside of Recology that offer free recycling 24/7 for cardboard. I think most people tend to use it for cardboard, bottles and cans, metal. There's also in the buyback center, they have used oil recycling. They accept mattresses, you see it here. In addition to what we offer for our program, including, I will say, state award-winning outreach and education, code enforcement, planning support, anything that would be sort of internal to the city is also covered through those rates. So it's a wide variety of things that you're paying for with the rates associated with our utility.
Can I ask a quick
Yes,
question?
of course.
What are waste audits for businesses?
So waste audits for businesses are going to be when Recology Davis will come to the business and say, are you following all the rules? Because there are a lot of them. So there are certain rules around the amount of material that a business might generate that requires them to have a certain type of collection service. SB 1383 requires them to have adequate access to compost containers if they have any type of organics material that's being produced. So let's say, for example, you have an attorney's office and you produce Kleenex. You would need to have some kind of compost container available for your customers to be able to place that Kleenex, because that is in fact where it would go. And so if you don't have that, then the audit would say, hey, you need to have a compost container here. The other place in Davis where we put compost containers is going to be in restrooms, because the majority of the time when you're drying your hands on those paper towels can be composted. They do not need to be thrown away. So that's the kind of stuff that they're going to be looking for. For our commercial businesses, especially the larger ones, these can be extremely helpful if you have challenges with space in your trash enclosure or challenges with the timing of your collection. So having somebody come out and say, wow, you guys really have a lot of material that you're getting rid of on a Monday morning versus maybe a Friday afternoon, maybe we can adjust the collections. Maybe there's one less collection on Friday, maybe one more on Monday. And that can really help them out with compliance. Anytime we're talking to single-family residents, to renters, to multifamily housing, to commercial businesses, we're looking for solutions and we're looking to help everyone understand what we're supposed to do and how we can comply. We're not interested in sort of any gotcha with folks on this, because it's in all of our best interest that we're following what the state has indicated we need to follow, but also what we know from an environmental perspective to be the appropriate way of disposing of these items.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So in looking at that cost of service study, we need to look at the rate schedule for rates to be able to, and I'll read here, support those program operations, balance expenditures and revenue, and continue the fiscal stability of the fund. And we know right now, based on the results of that, we're not able to do that with the rates that we currently have. So that sufficiency analysis determined that we are not taking in the money we need to be able to cover the programs that we offer. And without adjustments to those rates, we're potentially looking at, continuing obviously to exceed our revenue, which depletes that reserve, and then that's independent of any additional increases in costs. That would include landfill tipping fees, hauler cost adjustments, even our standard hauler cost adjustments. And then, we still, with the recommended rates that we have from the consultant, will be dipping into the reserve for a couple of years, but we see that recovery as we need to see it to make sure that we're able to move forward and maintaining that health of the utility. So let's get a little bit more into those drivers of adjustments. And like I said, there's quite a lot that goes into compliance with these state regulations and the operation of a solid waste utility. And with regulations in particular, we really have kind of a division between what are direct impacts and what are indirect impacts. So directly, you have SB 1383, which is sort of this giant legislation that came through and was finalized in 2022 and required mandatory organics collection for every jurisdiction within the state of California. It's messy business if you did not already have access to a composting facility. Remember I mentioned that before? Or you didn't have mandatory organics collection since 2016, which we did. So there were things that were happening in Davis that really helped us comply with this and made that immediate impact of SB 1383 much less.
than it could have been, but it still sneaks up on you, and there's still costs that are associated with that. Mandatory collection, like I said, in diversion regulations, I have a whole fun list of some of our assembly bills there that list out the requirements for different types of businesses and what they can and can't place when and where. Landfill tipping fees is a big one. So when we have material that goes to the landfill, they have the ability to charge us per ton based on the cost of them doing business. It's not the same as it would be for us talking about rates with you guys, where there's a Proposition 218 process and we have the majority protest process and we go through that. Instead, they can really determine what those rates are going to be based on what's going on at the landfill with relatively no notice. So we did have a more challenging issue a few years ago with the landfill in seeing fees that would increase in a less predictable way. We were able to secure some contracts, so that was smoothed out a bit. But there are things that are happening at the landfill. We described it a little bit in the first report you received on August 6th that are impacting the ability for the landfill to function and are increasing those tipping fee costs for trash for us. Those would be direct impacts to the cost of providing service. Those indirect impacts are going to be things like outreach for educational, for compliance, right, to explain those regulations. It is important that we reach our diversion goals, so we make CalRecycle happy, and we maintain our status as sort of a model city for CalRecycle. That's a lot of fun for us, but that costs a lot. That's a lot of work. We do have literally state awarded outreach and education. It also costs, it's a lot of work. The types of services that we have, the waste audits, the cardboard collection, those things are extremely helpful for us in being able to identify where do we have challenges in compliance? How can we adjust our outreach and our education and our programming to be able to address those challenges? How can we help businesses where we see contamination again and again and again to be able to try a new approach to see if we can reduce that contamination? So that is in aid of meeting those regulations, but it's more indirect, right? And so there's a lot of those things that are drivers of costs that are less directly connected. The other piece, of course, is going to be those labor and equipment and operation cost increases. And we mean labor overall. So that's labor with the hauler, that's also labor with the City of Davis. The increases in professional service contracts. So when we've had, we did a downtown waste management plan, for example, those costs increase as those labor hours also increase. So we've been seeing that as the years have gone on, especially between 2022 and now. So the big question is what we're talking about today are adjustments that don't include any service level changes or any structural changes to our utility. And that's on purpose, and that's for two reasons. One is the pressure based on the fact that we are spending more than we're taking in, and we're seeing what that's doing to the reserve. Ultimately, if we were to need to obtain a loan, and I will say another interfund loan for those that are new here, we do have one existing with this utility. That is also an impact on rates, but a little bit in the future as we're looking to pay that down, and we would like to not do that. Also, we want to make sure one would actually be available if that was needed. And then we also have a new contract for our franchise agreement upcoming. So the contract that we currently have expires December 31, 2027. We are looking to extend that contract for a time. We're going to go chat with council and see what they're interested in, because we need to make sure that we have the time now to be able to focus on ensuring we have the fiscal stability within our utility, and then the time that we're going to need to have all of those discussions about service levels and what the community would like to see in that new contract. And both of those are going to take a little bit of time. So we need to make sure that we can focus how we need to, where we need to. And this would absolutely be the time that we'd be looking at service levels and program offerings. And then anything that would happen as a result of those discussions would come back to this commission. We would look to review those rates again and see what the changes potentially might be, how they would impact the rates or not. And then if another full study is warranted, and we would go into it at that time. So essentially, we're looking at postponing those service level discussions for when we're able to talk about the contract. So what,
And to be
yes.
clear, you're talking about the contract with Recology
Correct.
Davis.
Yes, yes. And that is 91% of the expenditures of the utility, so it's a not inconsequential topic for discussion. So what are those rate recommendations? As you received in your report, here they are. So we're looking at both the percentage recommendation in addition to the dollar amount that's included for each of our residential cart sizes. Our medium cart size, which is that 64 to 65 gallon, is our average across the city. So the most residential customers we have are going to have that 64 to 65 gallon cart. And so that's sort of the main slice to look at there. We've also included for the residential utility bills, these would be bills for a month, what that calculation of the rates look like. Before any type of adjustment and then after in terms of the proportion of each utility within that pie. And I will say this does not include the municipal service tax and public safety tax that are also on the utility bill. So this is just for the utilities. So the next logical question, what do other communities pay for solid waste collection? And it seems like a really clear question. The challenge becomes, it's not. Because as you see here, what different programs are offered in different jurisdictions makes it more challenging. Also, whether or not the cost of certain types of programs are included within that sort of base rate for the customer or not. So you can see here in the total monthly rate column, that's the second column in, that is the total that the folks are paying for their solid waste. And that's inclusive of anything in those following columns that's also separated out, right? So for example, Woodland pays $18.02 for their trash, right? You think, wow, that's really different from what we pay. But they also have a recycling rate, and they also have an organics rate, and they have less offerings than we do here. And so you're looking at a different service level, and they're paying a different amount. And this chart will show what Davis is paying now, and also what Davis would be paying with the recommended adjustments that we've included. So you can see we kind of go from the bottom of the pack to the middle of the pack. And always for fun, we show San Francisco because, my goodness.
Although, I mean, the Woodland comparison is probably the best true comparison because you're using the same landfill. All those other cities have different landfill arrangements. I don't know, maybe they're more favorable than ours, maybe they're less, right?
It's possible, yes. Woodland is also, I think, a little bit different in that they do offer less, but you are correct, they would use the same landfill, yes. West Sacramento, Winters, they would also use the same landfill as the Eola County landfill. Sacramento uses the Eola County landfill for some things as well. So it's not necessarily jurisdictional only. They can accept from other locations. But one thing that's very important for utilities is to make sure that they can get contracts with the landfills so that they will take their material and take their material to the right place. And that was a change in state law that happened with SB 1383, is all jurisdictions were required to say, I'm going to give you my organics and you have enough space for it. And so that was something that the Eola County landfill had to do for everybody in Eola County, was make sure that they had enough space and could give you, to take their organics. Okay. So, what do we need? You know why we're here? We had lots of fun conversations. We talked trash, as my colleague likes to say, which is always fun. So we're looking for support for our recommendation for the rate adjustments that we have before you, or an alternative if there is other information that you would like to provide for council consideration. Any discussion tonight, I will be reporting, taking notes, and we'll be bringing the council when we are before them for an issuance of a Proposition 218 notice. When we issue that notice, which is generally going to be 2 weeks after the council meeting where they approve the notice, we have a 45-day protest period, which that gives the opportunity for any ratepayer that pays for that rate to file a formal protest with the city. There is a process of how to do that that is very clearly delineated within that notice that they receive.
The notice is also very prescriptive, and there are requirements in terms of what we include as a city to justify any rate recommendations that we have. A requirement for the state is that we receive 50% of our utility customers, and that would be an actual protest, that council would not be able to move forward. I believe we have like 17,000 solid waste customers there and around, maybe a little bit more. So it's a little bit of an achievement to get to that protest number, but as soon as I think we hit 1,000 protests, we start to do a validation process where we'll actually open them up and make sure that they are valid protests. Before then, we would not do that. So the next council meeting, after we have that 45-day protest period, the council holds a public hearing. They find whether or not they received the protest that would number a majority protest. If not, at that meeting, they would then be able to move forward and set those rates by resolution. And we would work with our finance department to determine what month would be the best month to start that process of implementing those rates. And then the thing that I want to underscore, and we will every time we talk to you about any kind of rate adjustment, be it this type of a rate adjustment or annual that we come forward, is we are setting through a calendar the highest and the soonest. So this is the most you can raise rates, the earliest you can raise them. Council always has the option to not go as high or to postpone to the future. And we have, and sometimes people say, yeah, sure, of course, but you're going to adjust if we say you can adjust. I will tell you, we have not. We've had financial reviews that we've brought to the commission, and we've said, look, solid waste is a great example. Back in 2023, we've met all our goals. We had a 5% adjustment that was on the books. We said, we're not going to need that 5% adjustment. Let's go with 1.5 CPI at the time, and we'll move forward. And that worked. So it is always possible for us to, as we move forward, be able to adjust beyond what we have. What we can't do is go any higher than what we have in the calendar or any earlier. So it's not like we could turn around and say, we have, scheduled for these 2 years, we're going to go 2 in 1 year to begin with. We would not be able to do that. And that is everything I have for you, in addition to the long staff reports that you've already received. So I'm sure there are lots of questions, and anything that we can do to facilitate this conversation, just let me know.
Are there any clarifying questions related to the presentation?
Yeah, I had one. I think you mentioned that the Recology is a private company. Can you tell us any background about that being a private company? Is that something that's abnormal, or is that happens pretty much all around in the other municipalities in the area?
Sure. It's very interesting because as there are different types of service in different municipalities, there are different types of operations. There are some that fully municipalize their operations. There are some that have municipal and contractual operations. There are some that are a combination, like we are, and there are some that are fully contractual. There is no interaction between city staff and a resident in regards to solid waste service. So it can be a wide variety. Generally, you're going to see Waste Management, you're going to see Atlas, you're going to see Recology. These are companies that are very familiar with working with municipalities there's a lot of specialized equipment involved in trash collection, and so I think a lot of municipalities will see a contractor as a better way to perform that operation. And when you have some contractors that are very large, like Waste Management, like Atlas, like Recology, you have a little bit of an economy of scale that also allows for some breaks in that as well. So it is pretty common for a jurisdiction to do it that way, but exactly how and where that line is between how they operate and how the private company operates can vary.
I had a question. And I probably wasn't reading the report last month carefully enough, because I see this term rate structure and then rate recommendations, and I conflated the two, but they're different, right? Is the structure the relative ordering of costs amongst different categories, or?
Yeah, yes, so that is true. The rate structure is going to be more a look at, what you're charging your customer based on their use of the utility, and potentially what types of services are offered by that utility. One example of a rate structure would be for our customers that are not able to receive yard material pile collection because of where they live. Maybe the front of their property has a marked bike lane and it's not safe for them to put material there. They would have a refund of what it costs to pay for yard material pile collection. So that would be looking at the rate structure. The recommendation in this case is really an adjustment based on what we currently have and then in addition to that.
And so is it just a percentage applied across all
Yes.
different rates?
Yes.
Great. And then question about the contractor, Recology Davis. When would the city ever consider putting that contract up for bid again?
So
Or is
It
there
has
something
never.
in the contract that says that can never happen, or it can only happen under certain circumstances?
council can do many, many things. It has never been up for negotiation, or not negotiation, sorry, proposal in my time with the city. Previous to Recology, we did have Davis Waste Removal, and they sold themselves to Recology, and Recology also purchased that contract. The contract does run through December 31, 2027. So at that point, council does have the option to consider a proposal process or a renegotiation process. We don't have a method of moving forward at this time. That's a conversation we still need to have. Part of what we're looking for when we have that conversation with council is to extend our contract for just a bit so that we have the time that we need to be able to have a real robust discussion within the community about what we're looking at service levels, partially because we've never done it before. And that's part of why we're looking at that longer time.
Great, thank you.
When's the, first, thank you for the amazing presentation. That was super helpful. I was curious, when was the last time we raised rates by this much, by 15%, and whether that resulted in the protest?
So the last time we raised rates, the approved calendar was 45% over 5 years. This is not that high. I believe that first adjustment was the highest, which is the recommendation here as well, because we're, again, jump-starting the bringing that reserve back. I believe we received 16 protests.
You said this one is not 25% over 5?
45%.
Pardon me?
45.
Oh, you said the earlier was 45%?
Correct.
Wow, I forgot about that one. That's substantial.
Well, and I think one thing that is important to remember when we're talking about percentage is sometimes when you look at a percentage, you're thinking a larger number, and not to minimize the impact of any rate adjustment, because of course we do not minimize the rate impact of any rate adjustment. When you're talking about the dollars, it becomes maybe a little bit of a different look. And so that's part of why we include the percent and the impact to that customer, so we can see what 15% means to a utility bill.
Sure, that makes it real.
Yes.
Are there any other clarifying questions? Then I'll open it up for public comment. No? Okay. Well then, is there any further discussion on this item? No? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion related to the staff recommendation to adopt the 5-year solid waste utility rate table?
To adopt the recommendation.
And I'll second. Is there any others in support?
Oh, are you calling for a vote?
Yes.
Okay. I vote aye. Normally the chair calls for a vote. All in favor say aye, all opposed say no. And it's never assumed that the people moving and seconding are in favor. They might just move the motion but be opposed to it.
I suppose so, you're right. Who is in favor of this? Say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Well, no, we said aye. Okay, so I guess the motion passes, and we can move on to the next item, which is the socially responsible investment policy memo review. And Mitch, do you want to do it, or should I? Okay. Yeah. Okay. You'll see that in the packet related to today's meeting, there is a memo from the Socially Responsible Investment Subcommittee, which consists of Mitchell and myself, related to options for updating the City of Davis's investment policy to reflect socially responsible principles. In addition to that memo, which includes a recommendation for folks here to consider, there is an amendment that we want to add to that. So in addition to the exclusions outlined under option 2, that it's on a separate sheet of paper that everyone up here has. I think there are extra copies as well if anyone wants to see it. And so feel free to take a look at that, but I'm happy to kind of briefly go through the actual memo. But essentially, we had conversations with Davis's investment advisor, PFM, internal staff, so thank you for being so available to us, as well as other municipalities and entities. And the current policy for the City of Davis is that the investments are to be made that will bear in mind the responsibility of city government to its citizens, support community well-being, equality of rights, economic development. No investment is to be made in a company that receives more than 51% of gross revenues from the production or manufacture of fossil fuels, weapons manufacturing, cigarettes, alcohol, gambling products. This is the current policy. And how this is operationalized is that there are, PFM, because this is also in relation to only the investments that are managed by PFM, not necessarily those investments that are managed by Camp or Lake. They have their own investment policies that when we, agree to put our money there, those investments are governed by those policies. So for the investments that are governed by Lake, or not by Lake, sorry, by PFM, they take a look at Bloomberg's sector classifications, which kind of put companies into different sectors based on their revenues, and from there they are given a classification of whether they make a fossil fuel company or alcohol, whatever it might be, and if it's more than 51% of gross revenue, then that means that they are not invested in by the city. So having conversations, we have come up with 3 options of what we think would be potential changes to this policy that we, one of which we are recommending of the 3, but we did want to put forward the full 3. And essentially, option 1 would be an industry-based exclusion, so just prohibiting investments in the industry, certain industries, which are coal, oil and gas, gambling, weapons. And Mitchell, was there, can you remind me about, this one is just like limited to a few sectors. And I don't know if we have in the memo.
Yeah, in Appendix D, it goes through further details and exactly how these exclusions would apply.
Let me pull that up. So it's essentially, there would be no change for option 1, which is it kind of sticks to the list that PFM already manages, except for it does add certain sectors. So currently, fossil fuels, weapons manufacturing, cigarettes, alcohol, gambling are the sectors that are excluded, and this would kind of separate that a little bit more. Coal, oil and gas services, pipelines, tobacco, beverages, brewery, casino services, gambling, internet gambling, lottery services, private corrections, aerospace defense equipment, electronics, military explosives, and firearms and ammunition. And so that would be the exclusions within option one. This would not have any cost the city any additional fees because it's using lists that DFM already manages. The next piece would be option two, which is the same industry exclusions with
It just adds on top of it, so further exclusions based on revenue sources, and so those are also available to be seen in Appendix D, and they include companies that get between 26 and 50% or higher of gross direct revenues from production or manufacture of fossil fuels, weapons manufacturing, cigarettes, alcohol, gambling products, small arms, private prisons, and several others. So it's the same restrictions that are in option one, plus further restrictions for certain activities that are deemed to be not in alignment with Davis, City of Davis values.
And then we also looked at an option three, which was excluding companies that received more than 25% of revenues from these various areas. And this one would, if you would essentially cost a little bit more because it would be a custom option. And so, but essentially, like what we're laying out is a few things. One is there an increase in the amount of sectors that are covered under a policy? Is there a decrease in the revenue thresholds and as well as are there maybe additional other pieces that that could be considered? Those would be kind of the main considerations. Are there any others that I should be thinking of?
No, I think you've done a good job explaining it. So basically the options that we're putting forward are, they range from most to least restrictive options. And we're going to propose that we'd recommend going with option two because both options one and two are not going to cost the city anything and aren't going to affect our investment returns whatsoever. But we think that it would achieve the most alignment of the investments of the City of Davis with the values of the City of Davis.
And then additionally, we have an amendment to option two, which also includes a piece on a human rights screen as well. So as I mentioned, that's the additional document that I provided, and essentially it's a policy recommendation related to, we had conversations with the American Society of Friends Committee, and they had a lot of information around human rights screens, and so we have a policy language recommendation around investment in companies that consistently, knowingly, and directly enable or facilitate genocide, apartheid, or other war crimes and crimes against humanity, provided that such exclusions do not materially impact investment returns and that the implementation occurs within a reasonable timeline for the city. And this, so they have a methodology, and this is also something that I've put into that document, and it corresponds to a particular list of companies that kind of fit under this particular methodology, and it is in alignment with the sector screen around weapons that we have proposed under the Bloomberg weapons screen, as well as including a company like, for instance, Caterpillar, which other community members have come forward in the past to talk about. And so, so in addition to a sector screen, what we are recommending is a human rights-based investment exclusion based upon the American Friends Society methodology.
For anybody who wasn't here.
And that's what's here on this page.
That's the
That
original
was
piece.
in front of us, and I assume others, and then I assume others have access to. Great.
And then we did have a number of questions at the previous meeting when we first brought our memo, and so those are also answered here. For anybody, we'd like to review what we discussed previously and the answers to those questions.
So I'm curious to know if there are any clarifying questions related to this memo that we included for today's meeting. Yeah, I just up here.
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for preparing this report and for addressing so many of the questions that we had at the previous meeting when we talked about this. This is a lot for, I really appreciate your guys' research and work into it. The question I have, I guess, is related to a number of the public comments we received. I don't know how ready you guys are to speak to, to whether the city currently has any investments in like Musk-related companies, and whether your recommended option would sort of apply to the companies that a lot of the community seems interested in excluding.
So I can take a stab at this, and Elena might need to back me up a little bit, but after looking through the treasurer's reports, to the best of my understanding, Tesla, which is the only company listed that would be issuing public debt, that is investment grade, technically it's not been invested in by PFM, but you can clarify.
I'm going by memory, so I would have to review all the investments report and see if that is the case. So I don't want to just go out and say there are none. The one thing I will say is we only control what, or can control what PFM does investing in. So if there are any investments that are pooled investments, such as LAIF, camp, or anything else that potentially could be a pooled investment, we have absolutely no control over, other than to say we don't want to invest in with those particular agencies, because that is outside of our control. So I cannot necessarily speak to LAIF has no investments, so indirectly there might be investments, but that is not something I will be able to see individually potentially without further digging into what the investments are within those specific pools, nor can I tell LAIF that they should not be investing in it.
So Chair, can I kind of add to that a little bit? Because I think, the public commenters have come a couple times and have appealed to you, and I just want to kind of offer some thoughts about, first of all, this work came from council. It was a very specific request that came from me and Councilmember Beitla, and it was tied specifically to our investment policy. And I just wanted a couple of things. Elena has already touched on this issue of the fact that so much of our money is in these pooled money investment accounts. Other entities make the decisions about what they can or should invest in. We also heard some public comment tonight here suggesting that we might want to be urging CalPERS, which is a major investor, to not be investing in certain Musk, related companies. I hate saying these words, but that is not within your purview as a commission. There is a legislative subcommittee of City Council, and if that subcommittee wanted to undertake that kind of work, that's kind of where it would sit, that kind of work, where we would be urging a state agency to effect a change in its policy. There was also quite a bit of discussion in the public comments urging you to take some action that would not allow the city to be contracting with certain Musk-affiliated corporations. The whole contracting practices of the city are completely separate and independent from the investment policy, and it's not evident to everyone. Those are governed by a completely different set of policies and by municipal ordinance. So it kind of, again, hate to say it, but they're totally outside the scope of this item that you were asked to look at. So I'll just make a couple of those comments. There were some other comments about not using the certain X and AKA Twitter platforms, and those again are sort of council decisions sort of that aren't really within the scope of this agenda item. So, and hopefully that helps to clarify.
Are there other clarifying questions?
I guess I do. I'm still not understanding what the recommendation is. And by the way, this was excellent work that this subcommittee did, so I tip my hat to all the members. But can you point me to where in this 12-page report is the recommendation that you're asking the Fiscal Commission to support? And then I'm assuming that what's on this page would be in addition to, or is what's on this page the sole recommendation?
So if you actually go down in the memo to Appendix D, it has a comparison table of different options. And what we are recommending is kind of at the bottom of that first page of the appendix into the second. So essentially what we are recommending is that for companies that are within the listed, the sectors listed in Appendix B, or no, not B, sorry, Appendix A, it has all the sectors. So within that list, if a company derives basically over 26% of their 26 to 50% of their revenues from these sectors, that they be excluded.
Okay. And so this column says sample policy language. So is the recommendation that we just take that block of text from that column's sample policy language and add in this additional paragraph? And that's the recommendation you're asking the Fiscal Commission to make? Okay.
And so if you're curious about the different industries, they're all listed here.
Yeah.
So I printed it out for
Okay,
myself.
that's great. And then and I see where we are currently from the committee report, so I understand where the city currently is. This language here, I'm just seeing for the first time, but what is it, who's the arbiter of companies that consistently, knowingly, and directly enable all those things?
Sure. So the list that would be associated with is that's kind of how the American Friends Society committee, they have definitions around what consistently, what directly, and what knowingly means. So essentially a company that I think it's listed there, but essentially they are ones that too many papers up here. Should be more organized. But essentially companies that continue to provide services, companies that directly provide the service. So if you're making a button for a uniform that goes on to a soldier or something like that, that is not directly participating in human rights violations. And then so directly, consistently do it over and over, and knowing that their products are being used for that their products are being used for a specific purpose, which is essentially those listed there. And so the American Friends Society Committee, they're quicker to pass this, and so they look at all of these things, and they put together a list of companies that are participating in these activities, and it is agnostic of geography. It is essentially just looking at those items and putting together a list of companies that participate in those activities.
And I mean, what's the impetus? And forgive me, I don't know when this memo, was this memo originally presented to the commission several months ago? And this is a revision
Yes.
dated August 28th. And then that's further revised by your,
Yes.
and so what was why this in front of us?
It's because we had outreach to members of the community and other interested parties who are interested in socially responsible investing. And so then we had follow-up communication with somebody from this organization. And so then we were able to talk with them about what they were doing. And that's how we got this idea. And I think also, I would be in support of this, but the other options that we had considered, we had discussed with PFM, with our investment manager, so we know what impact they would have on our investment returns and the cost of the city. So I think, like for this amendment, I would be in support of it if it was also like the other option too, not going to cost the city extra money and not going to affect the city's investment return significantly.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the main difference I see from the current city policy, aside from adding the additional sectors or activities, I'll call them, is that the current city policy says more than 51%. What you're proposing or recommending in option 2 says more than 26%. So to me, that seems pretty substantial. And when you met with PFM, did you get the sense that they analyzed this carefully, or did they just kind of look over the list and say, yeah, I think that, I don't think we'll have any problems?
I mean, they definitely spent some time looking, like, before they responded to us, and I'm pretty sure that it's probably prudent of them to have spent some time on it too. And so I believe, it is my understanding that they did spend some time looking through and going through and telling us that this would not necessarily change any of the companies that we have invested in like the near past, like, because it doesn't actually expand the universe of like what they, or limit the universe further.
I just correct one thing that, just for clarification for everybody, that not only does it, the proposal for option 2 would change the threshold from 51% to 26%, but it also increases the number of excluded activities. So not only, it's more restrictive in a couple of ways, so the percentage-wise and also the activities that we're not putting our funds towards.
Yeah. I mean, looking at those treasurer's reports, which do list well, some of those names are recognizable as companies. Maybe some of them are presented in a way that you're not quite sure what it is. But looking through those treasurer reports and seeing the list of companies that PFM, is that what the acronym of the investment firm, where they're investing the city monies, it looks like a pretty anodyne group of companies. I'm sure as you delve deeper into what they're doing, I would imagine practically all of them could be somehow in violation. And the public comments earlier, some of those things that were brought up, it's like, I don't know of a company that hasn't been sued over this, that, or the other. And so I really appreciate the work. I'm a little uncomfortable with how much we're really peeling the onion back. I mean, I think it's great to have a policy, but it should be meaningful, and we should put our money where our mouth is if we're going to have it. And I just don't know, when you add this level of detail, I just don't know how you can evaluate that list of companies that the city invests their money in and determine that they're all compliant in every way. And especially when you start subjecting it to a methodology that has words that are very broad, and we all have our subjective understanding of what those words are. I'm not saying we shouldn't have it, but I'm just a little uncomfortable that a significant change in the investment policy, first off, just that decrease from 51% to 26%, let alone how you even determine what the percentage actually is. I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with this because it just, and I'm not a big fan of just feel-good stuff. I think if we do something official, it should have meaning. We should be able to ensure that we're upholding whatever the policy is. I'm not saying we shouldn't have this. I'm just uncomfortable that there's enough subjectivity in here. How do we actually arrive at a determination that a specific investment meets the policy or doesn't meet the policy? And look, I'm not saying you should have figured that out. That's an enormously complicated matter. But I just want to be upfront. This is some of the discomfort I have with, this task that I'm guessing was, I don't know if this was a product of this commission or if this was something the council had asked for.
So maybe I can clarify on
Sure.
some of the questions that you have here. One, the council has asked for it. A lot of community members have reached out and have come here and to council related to investments and the investment policy and the SRI policy, so that we were directed to work on this. The second piece is, I'm going to break apart the recommendation into two parts. One part is so there's fuel companies, tobacco companies, gambling companies, that sort of thing. And then, the percentages of revenues. So sorry, I'm not speaking into this, my bad. But essentially, Bloomberg, what they do is they create lists. And they are industry recognized lists that look at where revenues are coming from for companies. And based on where revenues are coming from, what they classify that into percentages, and then if a company meets a certain percentage of revenues coming from a certain place, then they are classified as an alcohol company. And so it's a very well-recognized, broadly accepted classification system for classifying companies into various industries. And so the first part of this is that we essentially, and they have the percentages as well. And so what PFM currently does is they look at that exact classification system, and when there is 51% of revenues coming from any of these places for the currently excluded industries, they essentially see that is not on the approved list of investments, because they have a certain list of investments that they analyze and then they add to an approved list. And so this would essentially be potentially removing companies from that approved list based on how much of the revenues come from certain areas.
And there's that specificity in the Bloomberg state list.
And it's also just something that's industry recognized, widely used. And so when we asked PFM about this, how many companies on the approved list would be impacted by this sort of exclusion or option if we were to include all of these various industries and sectors and move that threshold down to 26% or above, they said that it was about less than 25% of companies would be impacted. And when we asked them how significant would these restrictions be in terms of reducing investment opportunities for the city, because we want to be widely diversified as a city, that's really important in terms of preserving the capital. They said that it could impact, those potential up to 25%, but they expect that the impact would be minimal on the overall diversification or returns. So that's the first piece with the sector classifications and thresholds that I think you were asking about. And then the other piece would be there have been a lot of public commenters, but also just folks in the community who reached out about human rights screenings. And so that's also something that we looked at. Our challenge in making the recommendation initially was just that we couldn't find a particular, we weren't sure what list is out there of that's well respected, that is clear in their definitions and their methodologies, that identify companies that are human rights violators. Like you were saying, what does that mean? Is it, and so, but we did have a conversation with this particular group, and they seem to have a very strong methodology in terms of their definitions and how they were defining, I think I had the three terms there, the knowledge of the violation, the consistency of usage of their products in the violation, and how directly their products are used in that particular violation. And so they had a very strong, they had strong definitions. They were very clear when looking through their methodology of how they identify companies that are participating in human rights violations. And so that's what I felt comfortable adding that on as something, but it is with the caveat of, within a reasonable timeline. So there are obviously investments that the city makes that potentially would stay on, they need to mature. And so as that, that would be a decision for PFM to make. What is a reasonable timeline? And then also to just minimize impact on investment returns and to preserve that diversification.
And there's no Bloomberg screen for this list for human rights.
So, sorry, I just want to make a quick comment in that regard. The part that I do not know, because I certainly haven't talked to PFM as it relates to this addendum that was included. I don't know if they use American Friends Service Committee. So I'm not sure if it's going to be, I'm going to call it an additional service, because I'm not sure if it's paid for service or not. So I'm not sure if that's going to be potential an additional charge or not. But the only part that I think you've touched on it a little bit was human rights to each individual person is quite subjective. So I do not know if there are any other companies that define human rights in a different way. That's one thing that we had PFM come out and do a presentation that they've talked about was whatever information or definitions were put in the investment policy, make it objective so that they can actually follow those. Because then they can execute the policy in that way. When it becomes a little more subjective, then the question is, okay, is it going to work? Because to one person it's one thing, to another person it's something else. And so it may be a lot more difficult to implement, or depends on who is looking at it. So with just that in mind, as the commissioners discuss this additional language, I just want to point out that I'd like to make sure that we also work with PFM and they can determine that yes, they can execute the portion of the policy, because as Commissioner Vink said, it's one thing to include it in the policy, but if we can't actually do anything with it, I mean, what's the point? So I just want to make sure that I understand where the commission is coming from. I just want to make sure it's executable at that point.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is consistent with this is that there's a great deal of specificity which I think is what is helpful in implementation, is having great specificity. And so there is a lot of specificity in what these terms mean and what they mean for companies and definitions. There's no cost that I know for this particular framework. And so, but maybe there are others that PFM has heard of or knows about that, would be similar. But the one that I think we are recommending alongside this, just as a subcommittee for the commission and then for council, is this particular one because of its specificity.
And I think because of what Director Adair is saying, I think that's why it's very important to me for this addition to be added, that it includes that its addition is subject to PFM reviewing it, saying it's actionable. It's not and also not going to incur further costs, both like direct costs that we pay for the investment services, nor for our returns.
Madam Chair, can I ask another clarifying question about the option 2 that's recommended? So it says avoid any company that receives more than 26 to 50%. I'm confused. Is it 26%? Or what is that range between 26 to 50 mean? Don't you mean 26% or?
Yeah, I think it's just.
I think that's confusing.
It's just a typo there. It should be just greater than.
So more than 26% is what you want the recommendation
Yeah,
to
more
say?
than 26%.
Okay. But everything else in that block, in beginning on whatever that is, page 10 and continue on to page 11, is the recommendation that you're making in addition to this paragraph that is on the piece of paper that was presented to us this evening.
Yeah, provided that it's implementable and that it doesn't materially harm diversification.
So would a good way to move forward on this be to revisit after, since I know this like recommendation that you guys added, having spoken recently to that AFSC folks, would it be fair to say we revisit it after you've had a chance to run it by PFM and make sure it's something they feel like they can execute?
Well, I think we have the option to do that, or we could approve it subject to review by PFM with the qualification that if they don't think that it's either implementable or that it would cost either for incur an additional service cost or cost in reduced investment returns, then it would be acceptable. So we could do it either way. I think we have the opportunity to do whichever the commission feels comfortable with. I feel comfortable with doing it the way of approving it subject to PFM reviewing and finding it meets those qualifications, but it's open to the commission to decide what the whole body feels comfortable with.
I was thinking, so, okay, sorry, microphone. If there are any other clarifying questions, I do want to open it up for public comment. So if there are any public commenters who want to comment on this particular item, feel free to come up.
It's kind of interesting because the last 5 years I've served on the Quaker committee that's managing at least a large Friends Committee on National Legislation, which actually works very closely. It uses invested managers as Friends Committee on National, as Friends Service Committee. So very familiar with the process, very familiar with the returns. I can speak to returns over the last 5 years. I've been directly involved in the subcommittee that we advise them on investments. The returns are very similar to the returns in the Standard & Poor's 500. That the companies that are unselected don't have that big of a market cap to change the investment, with the one exception that when oil goes up and down, that affects returns. So the prohibition about the oil will actually have more effect in the variation of returns than probably the other screens that you're talking about. So it's I can give you some reassurance that this, and you're not implementing the more strict version, which is 2%. But the 25% probably wouldn't take that many companies down. It would probably take something like Palantir, which is a very overpriced company. It would be great to not invest in, working on militarization of AI. But if you have any questions for me, I might be able to answer them. And I've been doing this work for about 5 years now, so knew their prior record for the last 15 years. I have a sense of this is not a major change, but it will screen out some of the bad actors. It actually will not screen out Tesla. I've been trying to get them to screen it out.
thank you for that. Is there any other public comments?
I will mention, just in case, if you had the opportunity, but there was a separate public comment that was emailed. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read that or not, but if you need me to read it out loud, I can do that. Otherwise, I just want to mention that there was one.
Okay, so we have one in-person public.
Wait, Helena, was that emailed like a week ago or today?
No, that came in today.
Okay.
Hey, this might be a silly question, but I was looking through the appendix and I couldn't find it. Is there a definition for material impact to the investments?
So this is not in the packet, but it will be included, the extra piece, and then from there, it would really, that is defined on the American Friends Service Committee website.
Amazing, thank you.
Elena, are there any other in-person public comments? Otherwise, maybe do you want to read the comment that came in?
Yes, I can read it. So it came from Rodrigo Ajeda Beck, that's the public commenter. I support an update to the city's social responsible investment policy. As noted in the memo in the commission packet, I think it should include companies screening by sector, example, weapons companies, fossil fuels companies, etc., but also companies that are involved in human rights violations but don't fall into the traditional categories like Caterpillar, which is technically classified as a construction company, but whose business is directly involved in occupations and genocide. There are organizations that create lists of companies involved in human rights violations that the city can use to screen companies. Thank you.
Were there any others that were submitted?
Nothing that came in via email.
Okay, well, we'll open it up for further discussion here. Anyone has anything you want to say?
I would just make a motion if, whenever the discussion is finished, I don't have anything else to discuss.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll just say at the outset, I'm prepared to move a motion for the recommendation in your report. I would not include this, and I'll be opposed to a motion that includes this. But I just want to put it out there as a,
Maybe
I'll be a no if we include this here. I'm just not comfortable with the subjectiveness of this particular recommendation. Oh, and 26%, I'm assuming that again, the recommendation is 26%, not 26 to 50%.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so,
Maybe make two motions. We can move both of them separately so that we have an opportunity to do that.
yeah, okay, so your motion, I'm sorry, could you just restate?
Oh, yeah, I'll move the subcommittee report recommendation option number 2. And again, I'm not going to read all of it, but it's the policy language, the sample policy language, with the amendment that it's 26% of gross direct revenues, not 26 to 50% of gross direct revenues.
Are there any other motions?
I think you need to dispose of that motion first before you entertain other motions.
I'll second this motion.
Okay, and then I guess we can, is there any further discussion on this particular motion? Otherwise we can go.
Sorry, to clarify, that we'd be moving just on this and not including this?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the motion.
I feel like because we caught this just right before the meeting, I personally don't feel like I've had enough time to consider the addition.
We are not considering the step.
Right, but like to consider whether or not I want to support adding it or not, that is what I'm saying. And so I would propose a modification to the motion to maybe revisit it at a future meeting after we've had a chance to run it by PFM and for the commissioners to be able to further just ponder this potential for this addition.
That sounds good. We should address that after we're dealing with this motion for the, to approve or not approve for making the recommendation for this memo that,
Yeah,
for
so I
option
think
2.
on this particular motion, we have a second, and so I think we'll just go to a vote on this particular motion. And so I'll just, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed to the motion? Opposed? So I think that is not majority. Oh, did you have?
Sorry, I didn't hear you call the
Yeah,
motion.
Madam Chair, you're going to have to, maybe it would be helpful if there's disagreement or different votes to actually ask for an aye vote, ask for aye votes, document those aye votes, ask for no votes, ask for abstentions. It just, we have to be clear what the vote is.
I think there were 2 ayes and there were 2 noes.
Oh, I see. I didn't hear 2 noes, so there's 2 ayes and 2 noes.
Can you state them, because I couldn't catch it either, I'm sorry, that's why I was.
Oh, that's all right. So I think there were 2 votes in favor, and then when I requested votes opposed, I voted, I am in opposition, and I think Leslie also mentioned that she is in opposition
So you were in opposition to the main motion?
to the motion,
Okay. So you're in opposition to the recommendation that your subcommittee made?
Well, no, because the recommendation is not what was in that motion. You moved for just that particular piece and not the addition. So
Right. Madam Chair, if I might suggest, and forgive me, but you can take this subcommittee recommendation that's in the report that was made public, that people had a chance to review, and presumably if they were concerned about it, they could show up this evening and make public comment. The motion is to approve that. This, which I have substantive problems with, but I have real procedural problems with, this being dropped this evening. Anyone who is in the public who is concerned about this topic has not had a chance to hear this unless they're in the room tonight. And there's not a lot of people in the room tonight. So I think it's your prerogative as chair to take this up as a separate motion to include it. I will be voting against that if you do, but I'm happy to support the recommendation that was included in your subcommittee's report that was part of our agenda packet this evening, with the correction of removing dash 50% from the language there.
okay.
And for all I know, I might be the only one who has a problem with this on either substantive or procedural
I
grounds.
feel like we're actually all saying the same thing. I feel like the reason Commissioner Veitel and I are opposed to the motion is to further consider this piece. So we wouldn't be voting to approve this and add it in now. We're approving to move it to a later discussion so that other commissioners could further consider this before we vote on the thing as a whole. Does that make sense? I think we're actually all saying the same thing.
Okay. Well, not to get all Robert's Rules of Order on you, but you can make a motion to table this matter or to postpone it to a future meeting.
Right.
That motion would take precedence over the motion that's on the floor now. which is to approve the recommendation in the subcommittee report. So, not going to tell you how to vote or what to do, but if your intention, and thank you for clarifying that because I didn't understand that, I would have been fine to just defer this matter for the future with further investigation and public notice of what is on this piece of paper. But I would certainly be supportive of a motion to either table or to postpone this to a future date, if that's your intention.
Yes, I think we were trying to finish the first motion, and then that
move
was
on
my
to-
proposed motion.
But
I appreciate this discussion you're having, and obviously however you vote is up to you. But given what I'm hearing, I think that perhaps the motion to table would have been more consistent with what you're really trying to achieve here. And I was a little bit concerned that you might vote to transmit the main motion and then have a subsequent meeting where you took up this other issue, because I want it to be a fairly consolidated action before it goes through to the process of drafting staff report and goes up to council. So it would seem like you'd want to have full consideration of all the issues in a single meeting, if that's possible.
right, so
Okay, so with that, I will move to table this discussion to a further meeting so that we can have time to consider this addendum.
Great, I'll second that motion.
and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, so everyone here is in favor. And then,
Quick question, I just want to clarify. There was an original motion for the option 2, which was voted on 2-2. So are we withdrawing that?
you withdraw that.
Okay.
You should have a formal motion to rescind the vote. Thank you for that question.
Actually, you bring up an important point. If
Yeah.
the vote is 2-2,
Oh, did
I guess
pass?
that means the motion fails because you
It's
don't have a
failed.
majority.
Yeah, so I just want to
Okay.
make sure I understand.
And I forgot that part of Robert's
Failed.
rules of order.
Motion failed, so there's no need for motion to reconsider. So
Very good.
we're having a little tour here tonight of procedure.
Okay, so I think we can move on to the other subcommittee updates, which would be the down payment assistance loan program.
Yes. I can speak to that. Okay, so thank you guys for all the comments on the report at last month's meeting. I wanted to make a couple clarifications just based on listening back to it. I just wanted to clarify that in the report, the subcommittee was not recommending any specific form of DPA. We're not advocating that the council adopt a DPA or adopt this, a specific sort, or we weren't even really advocating that they not adopt one. The goal of the report, as requested by the council subcommittee, which we laid out in the introduction, was to explore a number of questions and considerations that were related to fiscal considerations for the city, and those were listed in that introduction. And that's kind of what I feel like we did. We sort of went out, we did some research, we talked to a lot of experts, we sort of laid out what a lot of the experts said, we synthesized it, we tried to limit it to the things that seemed relevant to the council's questions. Because Elena very helpfully provided us with sort of a synthesis of a lot of the questions that we got from last month's meeting. And I think a lot of those are sort of not in our purview, like some of them will be for the Social Services Commission to consider. And some of them are outside the scope of what was requested. Like there was a question about what do you call it? The community land trust that we touched on in the report, but just was sort of so beyond the scope of what was asked for regarding the DPA that we just sort of left a note to the council that said that if they wanted to be connected with the experts that we spoke to regarding the community land trust, we would be happy to do that. And so kind of where I personally felt we could move forward with that was to for the commission to sort of consider adopting the report and moving on so that it can move forward to council. And if they have any specific requests for further research on any of those particular topics, then we can go back and revisit those and delve deeper, but to sort of adopt it as it was, because it sort of, even as Vice Mayor described last time, it sort of addressed the ask of the subcommittee. Yeah, I don't know if anyone had any questions about it, but that was sort of how I felt about the questions that came up from last month's meeting.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to commend Commissioner Aim. You didn't hear my complimentary words last month, but the report was excellent, and I think it really touched on all of the important considerations that we needed, and I know it was a lot of work to do that, so I just wanted to say thank you.
And I would second that, taking a look at it. Thank you. So there aren't any other clarifying questions. Are there any in-person public commenters related to this item?
Yes, indeed. And by the way, it was a joy actually listening to your discussions. You're doing a really good job, and I really appreciate the analytical approach you're taking to things. So for the record, my name is Dan Carson. I used to sit up there in different roles. I agree with your notion that you should go ahead and adopt the report. I don't personally agree with every word or every description in it, but I think it was responsible and reasonable and fair-minded attempt to survey this issue and provide information to the council, and I think it's worthy of your adoption. One news update, Elaine Roberts-Musser and I last month sent you a written comments proposing that you support a package of state legislation that would put a $10 billion bond issue on the ballot. I'm happy to report that with the help of your liaison and with the 5-0 vote of the City Council, they in fact have endorsed that legislative package with a really great addition that they should look for money to help provide affordable student housing in places like the University of California, which is consistent with our housing element. It's a great policy addition. I do think it would be worth your consideration of two additional points. One is to amplify your suggestion of creating a partnership with the state, that you suggest the council consider directing its social services and housing department to develop a program to help ensure that Davis residents take full advantage of both these state and these federal programs that already exist to provide this kind of assistance. It's our federal and our state money that we're paying that's supporting these programs. And as we have tried in many other cases, we should try whenever we can to get some of that money back to advantage our citizens and residents here. The only other point is we think you should tell the council that trying to initiate a city-funded program of this nature at this time we're dealing with such significant fiscal issues, that you would indicate this doesn't seem to be the right time for that. But I support your adoption of your report with or without those additions, but that's something you may want to think about. And thank you for your hard work.
Are there any other public comments or any that were submitted by email?
Only the one that Carson mentioned earlier, but it was a couple of weeks, I think, since that happened. Those were forwarded to you.
Okay. So this is just a question, just clarifying, because we have it, we don't have it on the regular items. I think we would have to table, okay. Well then, I think with this one, we don't have any additional actions that we have to take unless there is any additional discussion we want to have. Okay, then we can move into the long-range calendar. I don't know if Elena, you want to speak to this?
I think generally it's consistent with what we had before. We are still working with our economic development director. There were questions and just topics that were provided, actually, including today or yesterday. So we're working with her to figure out if that's something that would be, she'll be able to speak to. And there was a big variety. So just to let you know, the only other additional thing that will include an informational item for you. We have completed the fiscal year 22 financial statements and all the other audits, so that will come to you in the October packet. We literally finalized everything just a couple of days ago and just didn't have enough time to put it into the packet for today. But you will be able to see it at the next meeting.
Any questions or clarifications? Any public comment? Not seeing any. I think this is something that is there any other discussion? No. Okay. Then I will move to the next item. To adjourn the meeting, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Okay, first by Leslie. Second by Mitchell. Can I get a vote to adjourn? Anyone who is in support of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all in support. Then we are adjourned